I think you can give us great perspective about what's going on 8 weeks before the election. But first, I should mention you renounced your membership in the Republican Party in 2018, and you have said you are going to vote for Joe Biden.
100%, absolutely.
What was it that made you say, I don't want to be a Republican anymore?
Well, the Republican Party by 2018, in my view, had become fully the party of Trump and Trumpism. And I think that we know more today than we did even in 2018. The straw that broke the camel's back for me were the children detention and family breakup policies at the southern border. And I just think they were appalling. They were immoral policies. They harken back to the worst abuses in our country's history, the separation of families at the slave auction blocks, separation of Indian children from their families in the latter 19th century. What we see now, though, right, is Trumpism fully formed, rooted. It's an ideology. Republican Party of 2020 exists fully as an instrument for Donald Trump. It's a cult of personality. The evidence of that is the platform. What the platform requires is obedience to Donald Trump and loyalty to Donald Trump. That's the full meaning of republicanism now. And that Trumpist ideology is one that is illiberal, anti-democratic, bad for the country, and the party that is the vessel for it, that has been the handmaidens to the catastrophe that's befallen this country, is the Republican Party.
You started something called the Lincoln Project. What is the goal of the Lincoln Project, Steve?
It's to defeat Trump and Trumpism.
It's plain and simple as that.
Plain and simple as that. When you look at the Republican convention, there were three features to it. There was breathtaking lying of the type that you see in no healthy democracy anywhere in the world, one, but was unprecedented in the political history of the country. From the gavel coming down, right, to begin it, to the gavel coming down to end it. You saw utter lawlessness, right? Flat out breaking and violating of dozens of federal laws that have to do with preventing the use of taxpayer dollars for partisan causes, the use of federal property, and then lastly, and really ominously, you saw the seizure of important symbols of the American Republic, of the state. You saw Trump take those symbols, the White House, for instance, turn it into a partisan totem and an expression of his authority. So what does that all mean? Well, it means, in essence, that he's saying, I am the truth, I am the law, and I am the state. No, thank you. And that ideology, he knew how deadly this virus was. He knew it. The Republican senators knew that he knew. He lied to the country hundreds of times, downplayed this. It's the biggest, greatest, deadliest lie in the history of the United States. That's the moment we're in. And it has decimated the economy, broken a million dreams, and has fundamentally ended the American way of life.
There are many people who follow me on social media, and they will say, Steve Schmidt is biased. They describe the media as communicating fake news. Why do you think, if that in fact is the case and true, why does President Trump enjoy so much support still?
I think that there's two issues, and I think people get confused on them, right? There's a political question and there's a sociological question. And so let's start with the political question. The political question is that where you look right now in this, where this race is, Joe Biden has a bigger lead than Obama did, has a bigger lead than Bush did, has a bigger lead than Bill Clinton did. He has a commanding lead. The majority of this country rejects Trump and Trumpism and wants him gone. You look at the swing states right now, Biden is in a strong position. Donald Trump is losing the race. The second issue is a sociological question. And at least a third of the country is in thrall to a cult of personality. And so for 30% of the country, the millions of people who ascribe to QAnon, who are poisoned by social media, by disinformation that's both organic and state-sponsored, by a president who's lied 25,000 times and has let loose hundreds of conspiracy theories. You have a billion-dollar anger industry through extreme media in this country. And all of it accounts for a number that's way too big in a healthy democracy that hasn't just surrendered their agency to a political leader, but have opted out of reality in some fundamental ways.
Let's get a little more granular, Steve. 538 has Joe Biden up 7 to 8 points in national polls, also up in Arizona, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, North Carolina. President Trump appears to be closing the gap in Florida. So is it all going to get down to, as our late friend Tim Russert said in 2000, Florida, Florida, Florida?
I think Florida is incredibly important for a couple of reasons. First, Trump's made clear in a way that is completely alien to every other president, right? Like, democracy requires someone being willing to lose, being willing to say, we hear the voters, get you next time. Trump has inferred time and time again that unless he wins, the election is illegitimate. And there are 1,000 bad things that I can think of off the top of my head, right, that flow from that, from violence in the streets to chaotic, paralyzed government, a constitutional crisis. So when you look at Florida right now, Trump is overperforming with Hispanic voters, and he is underperforming at a historical level with senior voters. And so Mike Bloomberg's going to spend $100 million in Florida. I think Donald Trump's in a lot of trouble there. If the election were tomorrow, he would lose. But Republican state, Republican governor, the COVID crisis has been a disaster there. The governor's idiocy has rivaled Trump's, but it will be a state that bears watching. And if Biden wins it, it's all over early on election night.
But if President Trump holds on to Florida, it's a completely different scenario, potentially, right? Why are Hispanics still trending towards Donald Trump?
You have a lot of Cuban population, obviously, but also Venezuelan, South American, that is triggered by the socialism message, which hasn't been rebutted effectively by the Democrats or the Biden campaign. Now, the other group in Florida that is going to be hugely important in this election is the Puerto Rican vote, where you have about 400,000 Puerto Rican voters who have moved to Florida from the island since the hurricane. And that group of voters should overwhelmingly be Biden voters, but they got to be turned out. They ought to be communicated to. And that's one of the areas of focus too with the Lincoln Project.
Who else is this socialism message resonating with that has not been effectively rebutted by the Biden administration, that somehow a Biden presidency would be co-opted by the extreme left?
Well, I think that there's a broad, a deep, an extremely sophisticated, multi-layered propaganda network. That includes Fox News, includes talk radio, includes Facebook chat sites, it includes OAN and Alex Jones. And if you listen to the accumulation of it all, you think America's cities are burning right now, that chaos is at hand, that socialism, Antifa, all of these things are about to descend upon America, and there is a far too large number, that buys into it. I mean, look, we're going to see our first members of Congress who are QAnon conspiracy theorists, right? This is a conspiracy theory built around the fact that much of the governing class of the country are cannibalistic pedophiles, and Donald Trump is working secretly with the military to break up the ring. And it's a global phenomenon.
Let's talk about another key demographic group that each candidate is fighting for. We're talking about white suburban women. Now, Trump won white women in 2016 against Hillary Clinton by 9%. He's having a lot of trouble now with white women. Explain that.
The issue, more than any other issue that has peeled them off of him, is his embrace of all of the racial animus. And going back to George Floyd, to the embrace of the Confederate flag, that demographic in this country is just repelled by it. And so he is in a lot of trouble in the suburbs. And it's that demographic that is, more than any other in the country, right, dealing with, right, COVID in the sense, right, and moms everywhere. I mean, urban moms trying to educate the kids. It's a hard skill, right? I think this all disproportionately falls on the moms of America, and I think they're enraged about it, as they should be.
You believe the Democrats have not been effective enough in refuting the socialism argument. What about the law and order argument, Steve?
Yes, I mean, I think that the message that Joe Biden needs to deliver to the country is, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid of this moment, of each other. Do not let Donald Trump make you afraid of the future. Right? That he's got to talk to the country about the mess we're in and the plan to get us out of it. But he has to indict Trumpism, the dishonesty, the meanness, the malice.
Steve, let's talk about blue-collar voters.
Mm-hmm.
Listen to this quote by a 30-year-old electrician in Ohio from an article in The Economist. Quote, "He's done a great job. He's got everyone back to work. I'm pretty much 100% for him." Another pipe fitter added, "He shoots his mouth off, but at least that shows he's honest." What's your reaction to those statements?
I think the Democratic Party has a cultural problem, and there is elitism, right, and condescension, right, that flows from the elites of this country towards the working class people in this country, in the eyes of a lot of working class people. And one of the vessels, one of the institutions, right, that does that to them are the Democratic Party's politicians. When people are blasé about manufacturing jobs, all of these things, Trump speaks in a language that resonates with some of them. Now, if in fact, though, you look at the employment numbers and the things that Trump has said he would do in Ohio, whether it was the GM plant that closed, his calling for a boycott of Goodyear, I'd make an argument that that person is misguided with regard to who represents his best interests.
The impact on Bob Woodward's book, Jeffrey Goldberg's article in The Atlantic about calling people who served in the military suckers and losers, Michael Cohen's book, Mary Trump's book. There's a whole industry of people who are coming out and speaking out against President Trump. Will those things move the needle at all? Or will they make his supporters dig their heels in even more?
There are small slices of undecided voters, and there are Republican voters who know how badly he's failed, that have to make a decision to vote for Joe Biden, right? That they are, and we know this on our targeting and our research. So the military is the most respected institution in the country. Do I think that will hurt him? I think that will hurt him. I think that people know, number one, that he said it. It sounds like the type of thing Trump would say. He's basically said that type of stuff publicly before. Right. It's a perfect enunciation of the Trumpian philosophy. So yeah, and I think it's a disgrace. Right. And I do think that hurts him.
Fareed Zakaria was saying the other day that there's a real divide that exists between Democrats and Republicans, that Republicans are going to go more likely than not in-person voting, Democrats mail-in ballots. So on election night, it could appear that Donald Trump has won because the mail-in ballots have yet to be counted.
That is a scenario that could happen, and it's not a great scenario.
Why?
Well, because Trump will claim, and it's signaled that he'll claim that these mail-in ballots are fraudulent, and that as his lead evaporates, that result is thus illegitimate. And so you have, for the first time, someone who is lighting a fire around the idea of the legitimacy of an election for President of the United States in the United States of America. It's astonishing. And that no one in the Republican Party takes to the floor of the Senate and House and condemns this. But I think Republicans are on track to lose the majority in the Senate, and you'll see losses in the House races. And the reality is the party, from the total number of seats, state legislatures, everything else, has been decimated in the Trump era. And it's important to remember, this is a redistricting year. So bad Republican year is going to have implications for Republicans for the next 10 years. And Trump isn't going to go away. Trumpism will be here to stay. You'll have a very early start to the next presidential campaign cycle right away. And it will be led by the presidential candidates and by the media figures, right, who will have the most power because they'll be out of power in the government. You know, the most important figure in the Republican Party, right, if the Senate loses its majority, Trump loses the White House, is going to be Tucker Carlson. Right? It will be Tucker Carlson. It will be Laura Ingraham. It will be Mark Levin. Right? They will be the leaders, right? Because they have media platforms, right, of this noxious movement. And the market, the fight is going to be over, right? Who is the biggest Trumpist in the race? Who carries on the legacy? And that legacy, right, will be built on the illusion that the election was stolen, right? So that there will be a mythology, right, that exists around the start of the next election about the stolen election. Trump's not going to do what George W. Bush and Barack Obama did, right? He will be ever present in American life. He's not going gently into any retirement. And so, you know, all of this stuff that's out there now, right, that's been encouraged, all these white supremacist and white nationalist groups, all of the racial animus, it's all stripped bare. I mean, it's just plainly evident to see that there's a movement in this country, there's a political party in this country. One of them doesn't exist to make the union more perfect anymore, doesn't exist to advance policies under an intellectual framework. It exists to be obedient and loyal to Trump. That's what the platform is.
And what will become of Donald Trump himself if in fact he's defeated?
I have no idea. He may well decide to set up his own Trump media network. Who knows? But he's not going anywhere. And right now, it looks like Donald Trump's going to be defeated. That's the trajectory of the election. But could that change? It could. I think these debates are going to be monumentally important, and Joe Biden's going to have to make the case. He has to take the presidency from Trump.
Do you have faith that Joe Biden is strong enough to do that?
I do. I've been really encouraged by his performance over the last couple of weeks. I think he is genuinely outraged and offended, first over Trump's desecrations of his duty with regard to the military, but also with regard to what we're going to hear on all of these Woodward tapes as they're released and we get to all the revelations. And I think that I think that Joe Biden understands from his comments in the last couple of weeks that he has to confront Trump's vile character and the lethality of his incompetence in unsparing terms.
What do you see unfolding on November 3rd?
We have to consider the unthinkable when it comes to Donald Trump, right? Questions about the legitimacy of the election are profoundly important. I mean, our democratic history is not an entitlement to a democratic future. It's not. The country cannot take 4 more years of this. We are in the middle of one of the great crises in the country's history that was totally preventable. We're nowhere near the middle hours of that crisis. We are very much at the beginning of it. He cannot do the job. He is not competent to the task. He lacks mental acuity, intellectual stamina, and morality. The 21st century should not be defined by a collapsing American empire. He has stoked a cold civil war in this country. The assaults on the rule of law, he will be unchecked and unbound, and the country could be very different than the one we've all grown up in. It look a lot more like Orban's Hungary, and I can't believe I'm saying that out loud, but it is all on the line.